Kristen, it's so fun to have you here today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are the one that has had to travel the farthest to come to do the podcast
Yes,
here, right?
I came down from the 6th floor of the building. Yeah. Long commute.
And we're in Crosstown Preserve in Eden Prairie in this beautifully facilitated podcast room, which you had something to do with.
I did. I built the room. I bought the equipment and figured out how to make all of this work with a few others on my team. And this actually used to be a storage room, believe it or not.
Wow.
It had no glass on the walls and old ceiling tiles and terrible flooring, and made it what it is today, which is honestly mostly the equipment and the furniture. The room is secondary. So,
well, we really appreciated it. Yeah. We get to host this fabulous show from here regularly, and we're really grateful to Hempel, who you work with, for the opportunity to use this amazing space. You did a great job.
Well, good. And, I'm happy to see it used. I mean, we do these amenities in these office buildings to attract tenants, and we call it eye candy. But truthfully, I mean, it's a usable space for a purpose, and so I'm very happy that you're getting very good use out of it.
I think you've inspired a lot of podcast rooms around the Twin Cities too, because everybody that's here is like, wow, this is amazing. You don't cut corners.
No,
I mean, this is
No, and I could share you the bill for this too. It's not cheap, but I mean, you see the quality that you get out of it, so it makes a difference.
Well, and we're going to jump around, but I am, fascinated by all the projects that Hempel is working on, and there's an energy to the amenity piece of it that is really, I mean, you've done a great job in this building and all the projects that you're working on. There's some real creativity going on and with all the amenities.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm more of like, I execute. I do design, the construction, and get it done. And a lot of the vision comes from our owner, Josh, and Ben and Brent on the leasing side, because they're out in the market and hearing everything from tenants and what they want, what they don't want. And we collaborate and come up with things, but it's a really fun team to be on.
Yeah, well, that's a great partnership, right? So tell me how you got here. What's your story?
Story.
Well, it can't be too long a story because you're so young. I mean, you're one of the most impressive young people. I mean, I'm really old, so I can say that, but you've only really been in the business world for about 10 years, right?
Yeah, if I include my period getting my master's degree, it's about a decade.
Okay.
Yeah. Just under. So it's been a quick ride is what it feels like. And yeah, I got into this business because I love historic buildings. I have a huge passion for history and old buildings and the beauty in them, and abandoned buildings is actually kind of what sparked my interest, and I won't go too far down that road. But that's kind of how I broke in. I moved to New York City. I have a master's in historic preservation, which I apply very minimally currently to my job, but it got my foot in the door, and it gave me some form of credibility to get my first job in New York, which was for a masonry contractor, and I worked on some pretty amazing buildings there. So
what do you do for a masonry contractor?
Oh, so I oversaw a team of masons. So when you look at old stone buildings, there's all sorts of ways to restore them to make sure that they'll stay standing, that the masonry is in good condition, you don't have water issues. So that's what we worked on. We're big landmark projects, and some also just random small residential projects in Manhattan as well, and cemeteries. And but the first project I ever worked on, actual project in my career, was Trinity Church on Wall Street, which is a very famous church. And I still I pinch myself every time I think about that. I'm like, I did that project? It's insane to think about. And that's kind of how I got started. And that turned into me moving back to Minneapolis, where I'm from, working for a collaborative design group, which was or still is an architecture and engineering firm that had kind of a historic specialty. And so for about just under 3 years, I crawled around a lot of old buildings and wrote a lot of reports, and I found that I liked more being on site and project management and being a part of the design and the vision, and you get that from being an owner, which, I mean, I've found my place to stay at Hempel just because we're such an awesome team, and I mean, we drive our projects, and I think there's just something so amazing about that.
Well, you've got your hands in all kinds of different things right now, right?
Yes.
And so I mean, I can't even keep up with the announcements, right?
Yeah. Well, what's our most recent one? We bought a big parking ramp right next to our other big project, LaSalle Plaza, which is totally the buzz. And I just got under contract with our architect, RSP, to kick off all of our common area improvements. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure and everybody's watching, and so we better do it well. And I think we will. But I mean, it's now all of a sudden shifting downtown. We've been in the suburbs for 3 years now, excluding our Milwaukee portfolio, which I won't get into too much. And it's really exciting to be back downtown.
Yeah, and I'm hearing, your people who are in the market down there are taking a look at that building.
They are.
I mean, you're getting the looks. So you've created some really interesting energy there.
Yeah.
And it was not a small undertaking to get control of that property.
It was not, no. And maybe you should have Josh on. He can tell you his whole long story, long process. I think he's told me it was one of the hardest buildings he's ever acquired, but we got it done.
Yeah.
So, and I think that just kind of shows more so on his side, his 20 years in this business and how he does it. So I just help, due diligence, make sure that what we're buying is what we need and that I set a capital budget that's feasible. And for some reason, we never have enough money for capital improvements. But I think every owner would say that.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And tell me about some of the things that you're doing there, because they're kind of fun.
We're kind of just, it's such a beautiful building. I mean, it was built extremely well. David Frauenschuh built it in 1991.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Okay. And if you start looking at the architecture, and this is, I didn't hear this directly from David, but it was very much designed on Minnesota prairie. There's all these wheat details on the exterior, on the interior, but almost with like an Art Deco kind of vibe. So it has this really beautiful architecture as it is. But as you walk on the interior of the space, it's gone through some renditions of improvements, and it's been somewhat untouched, I would say, for at least a decade, if not longer. And we just kind of have to bring it into today. And our vision is really making it feel like a hospitality, concierge, almost like a hotel kind of feel, that you're in the city and you just have this like beautiful space to come to work, and that there's all this supportive services to give to you, whether that's through valet or, just improving our fitness facilities.
With pickleball.
With pickleball, yeah. I can definitely fit one court. We might be able to fit two in this space that we're going to take over some of the Rock Bottom Brewery former space, because it's a huge restaurant. It's been tough to lease. So we're going to give some of that back to the tenants and have pickleball. They can play any time of the day with their access card and get in. So we're working on the design of that, and I think it's going to be really fun and successful, and just bring a different energy, versus just this typical Class A office tower with some Skyway retail. Just giving it new life and trying to make that connection to Hennepin Avenue a little bit more interesting as well, because we're kind of on the edge of downtown, and there's a lot of work to be done there. We can't just do it ourselves as one owner, two property owners in that area. So that's kind of something that I'm particularly focusing on, is working with other owners downtown, and how do we kind of work as a team with our elected officials and everything as well. So.
Well, and I know that you say that you just love just immersing yourself in a project.
I do, yeah.
And the detail and it shows in the things that you do. It's really fun. I mean, to not just, I don't know. I think when in commercial real estate, we always say, like, we're not the broker that's just going to put a sign in the window, right? You're not the owner that's just going to buy the building and do some paint and carpet.
Right, exactly. You have to do a lot more than that. And for example, this building, it was for the most part renovated. I mean, when we bought it, we had the cafe, we had a tenant lounge, but it just wasn't hitting the mark. Quite right.
Was this a single tenant building originally?
No.
It's always been.
Originally it was built for Best Buy.
It was Best Buy. Okay.
First headquarters, or big headquarters, I should say.
Okay, yeah.
And as soon as they finished this, they were already planning their big Bloomington 494 property.
Got it.
Which is pretty interesting.
Okay.
So yeah, it was built originally for a single tenant, being Best Buy.
Yeah.
And then it was quickly multi-tenanted after that.
Okay.
But we've totally reimagined this building, and being in the building every day is what made it work. I mean, the lounge that we have, I think I've added things slowly over the course of like a year and a half. Like the golf simulator was an afterthought 6 months after we redid the lounge, and had to figure out how to build that in. And we added murals and art and did the patio. And so that's what I feel like a project like LaSalle is. We have a satellite office in the building. I'll probably spend, a good amount of my days there during the week, and just being there and experiencing it and seeing how people use it versus just kind of doing, we'll just throw some amenities in and create a nice, pretty marketing brochure and see if it works.
Right.
And that's where we found, like, for example, the West End, which we acquired November of last year.
Right.
It was
already been almost a year. Wow.
I know. Time flies.
It does.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Time flies. Yeah. But it was owned by a company out of New York, and they weren't spending the time to really get to know the center and what it needs. And we have really big plans for West End, and I can't really share too much what those are.
I've heard a few rumors.
Yeah.
I'm super excited.
Yeah. Some of them are probably true. But I'm super excited about that project as well. And again, different market. I live a mile away from West End, so I immerse myself in that neighborhood every single day because I live there, which is fun. So I am the demographic for that development, which is really interesting, is to kind of build things for myself and, my community. And it does help with, like, we had a meeting with the city last week, and I'm like, I'm a resident. Like, I support our development. It actually goes a long way to kind of have that personal connection to something and actually look at it that way. So
I love it. What do you see in immersing yourself in downtown, beyond even the buildings you guys own? Where do you see downtown going in all the people that you're talking to and what's happening with that?
I keep hearing it's coming back, and I see that. I mean, I sit in traffic now going downtown during the day. I mean, you see it in those forums, seeing more people at restaurants. I have lunch at Zalo tomorrow with a girlfriend of mine that works at Kristen Anderson. And I'm like, oh my God, Zalo's open again? Like,
and open for lunch, because I think they started opening in the evenings first. And
yeah. Well, maybe I have to check that they're open for lunch. Thanks for the tip. But in any case, it was just those establishments that, I remember having happy hours at Zalo.
I love Zalo.
Pre-pandemic, and I'm like, yes, it's slowly starting. And I think what it is, I mean, it's getting office tenants back, and it's never going to have the tenancy probably that it did pre-pandemic, at least not within the next 5 years.
Or 10
or
20.
10, yeah. And that's where it comes down to, what are other uses we can use for these buildings? And housing, of course, is one of them, but it's challenging in a number of ways for floor plates and construction costs. And so when I say I'm immersing myself, it's I was at an event last night for Michael Rainville on Latricia VTOP, so they're city council members of Minneapolis, and it's working with them on, again, being a part of the conversation with them as business owners, building owners in these areas. How can we all help each other and have a collective kind of vision? And, we're still much in the very early stages with that. We have an election coming up, so it's kind of have to have the election done and then get to work.
Right.
But that's really what it takes. It's not about just your individual building. It's, again, partnering with other business owners, building owners, kind of creating your own little coalition to make change. And there's a few other really great people doing that right now in downtown, and we're just starting to be a part of it, and we really want to be involved.
Who would you say? Is there anybody that comes to mind when you say there's really great people doing that downtown?
Oh, I mean, the Shermans have been doing it for a really long time.
Right.
Yeah. And Chris is really good at it. So,
he is. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one for sure.
Yeah, very interesting. You're on the board of Rethos.
I am.
Right?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And that keeps your hands in the
my gosh,
right?
It does. Yeah. And, it's more management, like executive level work than it is, like, I'm not in old buildings all the time because of Rethos. But what I like about it is, and it's a very old organization, it was founded in the 80s as the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, with a very, grassroots advocacy kind of niche behind it, saying, no one's standing up for our historic buildings or having any sort of kind of vision or foresight into what that means for Minnesota. I think in the Midwest, we have a different view on how historic properties are reused. Being out east, I mean, it's ingrained.
Oh, really? I never thought about the difference. Yeah.
Big time. I mean, there's multiple. And New York City is, it's the biggest city in the country, so it has its own.
And it's older.
And it's older. It's much older. But they have multiple historic preservation nonprofits by neighborhood even.
Really?
The World Monuments Fund is based out of New York City, and that's, they do projects all over the world. But again, it's like they're based in New York City because that's just kind of like the epicenter for this.
Sure.
And there's southern states too that have, but what we're doing is kind of giving a new look at preservation. And it's not just, the typical, you need to have certain windows, which is, really important for using historic tax credits. And again, I could talk about that for hours and hours and hours. But it's just having buildings be reused in a way that works for people and communities and for businesses. And it's really more about creating environments and communities that thrive, and reusing structures that create a sense of place is all a part of our mission, and we have a bunch of programs to fulfill that mission. But one of the best things we did that helped developers like myself and others is we pretty much instigated in our policies to have a state historic tax credit. And we just extended it for another 8 years.
Oh, is it 8 years?
Great.
That's
it's 8
fantastic.
Years.
And that was such a...
Yes, and we'll be back in 8 years to get it extended again.
For sure, but 8 years is a nice
it's a long
window.
time.
At least you can
you
get
can
a
plan.
project, approved and finished.
Exactly.
Versus like
Right.
these things that are just a couple of years. Projects take longer than that.
Take a long time.
Yeah.
And there's still some work to be done there. The policy is favorable to a point, but there's a couple of details that we're still trying to work through, and whether it's this legislative session or the next one, to make it more usable for developers to have the best incentive, because truly it's expensive to rehab these buildings, especially to convert buildings. And again, if we're looking back at downtown historic office buildings, it's going to take some help from our cities, and fortunately we have a federal historic tax credit, which will never go away. That's actually written in. But that's kind of where it's, we need some support, and we're willing to invest as much as we can on our side. But so that's where Rethos is so great to be a part of, is because it really overlaps with my business, but it gets me involved, again, going back to communities and all these other programs that meet our mission. That's about places and historic buildings. And I've been on the board for 4 years, and I think I have 5 years left on my term. So
wow,
yeah.
That's a commitment.
It's a commitment, yeah. But it's really great, and I've met a lot of really great people.
Yeah, it's a great board.
Being a part of it. So
yeah, that's fantastic. I used to always think that historic tax credit buildings that were historic or deemed historic would be a deal killer, and like you couldn't work with them if they were deemed historic. But there's so much more to it.
There's a lot more to it than that, and it is a benefit. I mean, owners will list buildings just for this tax incentive, because they do have to be listed in the National Register to have the incentive. There are some challenges with listing, though, particularly with local. So there's all these different tiers of listings. The one that holds the most kind of teeth and actual, putting your foot to the fire, this is what you can and can't do, is local city designation. So Minneapolis has a Heritage Preservation Commission, so does St. Paul. And if you're in a district, or if you're a building and you want to change windows, tax incentive or not, they have the jurisdiction to oversee your work and your project. And, it's good in a way, so, we're not demolishing these buildings. Minneapolis had a pretty bad reputation in the 60s and 70s doing that.
Well, look at
downtown.
if you look at maps and pictures.
Yeah,
of,
I mean, we've got big parking lots for a reason, and the Mill District is finally getting redeveloped, but that was just desolate for so long, and that was a big part of it, was just this kind of mass demolition back then.
Interesting.
So this local designation is meant to prevent that, to have these districts where it's like, no, we want to preserve this character, the area. But it does come with some challenges to owners with, having requirements to do certain things to your building, or if you want to put a rooftop like in North Loop, they have the right to say you got to put it 20 feet back so I don't see it from the street. And so it's a love-hate relationship a little bit, I'm not going to lie, but I think the overall mission and reasoning behind is best for our communities. It really is, but it comes with challenges. So,
you and I've chatted before, and I was always really impressed with how you got to where you are today, and it was important to you that the wage that you were paid was fair for women, right? Or is it just your age? Talk to me a little bit about how you...
Sure, I can. Oh gosh, the pay thing. Let me tell you, when I graduated from Pratt, New York City, I'm like, I have a master's degree. I was interning at this job, and they offered me, full-time, stick around, and I was shocked at the salary. I mean, it was bad, and I'll say it was $45,000 a year. And this is New York
in
City.
New York City, yeah. That buys you dinner twice a week.
It paid for my rent, which was an 800 square foot apartment with 3 roommates.
Gosh.
And that was in Brooklyn in an up and coming neighborhood. So not even, like prime real estate, and with no amenities. I mean, it was a walk up brownstone, and it basically covered, I didn't have a car. So there's some expenses you don't have, but it was, rent and fund money and, subway transportation, and that was it. And, at the time I was so happy. I mean, it was living in New York, and, but I challenged that salary, and as I got further into that role, and I actually ended up processing all of my employees' payroll, because not only did I oversee our crew, but I actually oversaw our business and our balance sheets and process payroll. I had this really interesting role in this really small masonry company. And I started getting really upset kind of seeing how other people are getting paid. And I'm like, well, this is what I'm doing. And how is that? Like, I get you just hired me, but there's something that seems there's a disparity there. And I feel like you're getting a really good deal for my work. And it just didn't feel good. I ended up quitting because I moved back to Minnesota. So I ended up having that conversation with my boss when I left. And I said, if I wasn't leaving, I would be asking for a pay raise of at least $10,000, and even that seems too low. And he's like, well, I probably would have supported that.
Now you tell me.
Yeah, now you tell me. So I think it's just, you need to have those conversations. And, it was even challenging coming to a design firm here. You don't make a lot of money right out of the gate. And particularly in that industry, unless you kind of get to senior level, principal level. And that was one of my biggest reasons for coming over to a developer, is just, I work really hard, so I'd like to have a pay that reflects that, and still do work that I love and that I'm super passionate about. And Hempel's been really good to me. So
that's and well-deserved, because clearly with every job you've had, you've been given, your talent, they've been able to give you an amazing amount of opportunity to work on really amazing, projects and do a lot, right? Because you're smart and you're a hard worker, and I know when you got here, you started working on things that you had no experience.
Oh, no
doing,
experience. CDG threw me into Treasure Island Center, which is how I know Hempel. It's because we were the architect, they were the client, and I got thrown into this massive adaptive reuse project trying to get entitlements with the city. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was actually, the reason why I work at Hempel is because of Randy McKay. He brought me in after I worked on that project for him. But how I got through Treasure Island Center was I worked with B. Kyle. She's now the CEO of the St. Paul Chamber of Commerce. And she was just a true inspiration for me. She controlled a room full of, men. Truthfully, it was like her and I and, the rest of the team.
Right.
And she was a big inspiration for me.
I do not know her.
Now you have to know her. I'll introduce you. She's somebody to know, and she's got a really amazing story. Started in the military, and big story.
Don't give it away. Maybe she needs to be a guest.
She needs to be a guest. I won't. Anyways, but that's having that experience was, they trusted me, and there were certain things that probably took me longer. Like, I would sit in meetings and I would be like, I don't know what any of those phrases mean. So I write them down and I go Google them later and just kind of nod with, okay, yeah. And you got to keep growing and learning. But there is that fact of it too. Experience does go a long way. I mean, from what I know now, working here in the Twin Cities, which is, I think, approaching 8 years now, it's night and day. What I've learned, and I have a lot more to learn. I think I learn something new every day, and I'll probably learn for the next 50 years. And so
100%. Things keep changing, and but you have the drive and the brains and to just figure stuff out, and people recognize that and just go, okay, here you go, figure it out. We totally trust you, which says a lot about you.
And I make mistakes here and there. I'm like, I didn't even think of that, because why would I, if I haven't done like a project like that? Like, just down the road, I built our first industrial building. I'm like, okay, I know the general idea of construction. That's my job. But it was tip-up construction. I was learning every day on how those buildings are built, and it's leaning and learning from your contractors and your architects and your consultants. And for me, it was just ensuring that our bottom line of the development was still being reached. So budget updates, do we need to call our lender for more money? I mean, these are the conversations we have as owners that are somewhat separate from, your contractors want to get it built, but I'm thinking about all of that, which is, it's been a whole learning experience just at Hempel thinking as an owner and how all that works. So
it doesn't sound like you have a part-time job.
No, oh my gosh, no. And I have a full-time job plus other jobs that don't pay me, like being on a board and volunteer
and
jobs,
being a mom of a 20-month-old.
Yeah, well, that's rewarding. I mean,
yeah,
I get paid by seeing her every day and seeing her happy, and so.
But how do you balance it all?
I have a great husband.
Oh,
yeah, he's very supportive.
I love that.
Yeah, so I couldn't do it without him. My parents live in town. I mean, they're just so helpful with watching her, or just, I mean, my mom buys her clothes and toys. I mean, they just spoil her in a way that, you just don't as parents.
Yeah.
Because they're your own kids. So I have help. And, daycare is amazing. She's in daycare full time. I couldn't do what I do without that. I try to work at home with her, and you just can't do it.
No, especially not
I don't know.
Age.
And if people do it, I don't know how they're doing it. I don't think they're working. It's kind of how I take it. So it's a balance, and some days I'm like, God, I don't want to go to work today. I want to hang out with my daughter, and I end up going to work because that's what I'm paid to do, and I have a responsibility. But I don't think I could just be a full-time mom, because I need this kind of energy and purpose outside of just a home life. And it's not easy. I'm stressed a lot and burned out sometimes, and also still trying to have a social life with a job and kids. It's like I'm not partying every weekend anymore like I used to in my 20s, but it's very different. So
yeah, I sometimes think that having both the work and the mom role makes you appreciate both.
It does,
even a little
absolutely
more.
Yeah.
And you never have it all. It's never perfectly balanced ever.
No.
But it is awesome to be a role model for your kids too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And my mom was a big role model for me. I mean, both my parents are amazing, but she was an executive growing up. I mean, she started in the 80s, early 90s, a woman in finance, which is pretty remarkable and inspirational. So I get a lot of that from her.
Yeah,
but she tells me she feels guilty, like, I wasn't around. I'm like, but Mom, you inspired me in so many ways. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, there's give and take with
there's so much give and
in
take.
life. Yeah, yes. Right?
Yeah, so I hope that I'm leading that example for Harper, and still spend the time with her that I need to. But there's some mom guilt there every now and then.
Yeah.
But
what do you see yourself doing your very own project someday?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I have a lot more to learn.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I really like the team that I work with. I feel like I'm a valued part of the team. It's not just like I'm just going to tell you what to do and you have to do it. It's if I didn't feel my opinion mattered or anything like that, I think I'd have a little bit of a different viewpoint. But I think Hempel's pretty great because we're not a super large company that, I work with all aspects of our company and have input, and I feel happy with where I'm at right now. My husband and I have toyed around, do we buy a duplex or something? And I'm like, well, that seems like a lot of work on top of everything else. So
right.
Who's going to manage it? Are we going to renovate it? Who's going to oversee that construction? Sure, I could do it. That's what I do every day. But all of a sudden now that's your weekends, that's your evenings. And, I like some time to decompress at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Running from one job to the next. So not yet, but maybe in the future. So we'll see. Yeah.
What the economy is kind of a little wishy-washy.
Yeah.
Things are hard. It's hard to get things done.
Yes.
Are you doing anything to try to mitigate some of the factors that are applying serious pressure to commercial real estate?
Deals are just harder to underwrite right now. Mm-hmm. And it's looking at, it's a really hard way to ask that because financing is expensive
right
now. Equity is pretty level, but you still have to meet a certain return level for equity that when you add in, interest rates, it's hard to get those deals to pencil. And construction prices, you know, we're seeing them kind of level, but they're never going to go down. I mean, unless there's this huge recession where all of a sudden your subs are cutting out all their profits, which, you know, we've seen in the past, but I have yet to see that take place yet. So it's, you know, working with cities, are there subsidies? I mean, that's a part of it. And it's a balance, and the biggest thing, and there's an opportunity, is getting properties and land at a big discount. So getting your basis low so you can afford the cost of financing and the cost of construction.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done. I mean, that's how we acquired West End and LaSalle Plaza.
Right.
So
they're making it easy for you then.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I still got budgets to hit, and they're still hard to hit. But we're making it work.
Yeah. Well, I, you know, really admire you. I wish
I
I
admire
was
you too.
as bright as you are, and it's really fun to watch the things that you're working on. You turn them into something that's really different, and you just seem to have it all together.
We're trying. Yeah. We'll have to talk in a year when some of our projects that are underway are wrapping up, and because I'm working on some of my favorite things that I think I've ever worked on right now, and they're so early. So they're going to take a year, maybe even 3 to all come together, but I'm excited for what's ahead.
Well, I know where to find you, and
you do,
know where
yes.
to find me. So maybe we should do that.
Yes.
Well,
we'll have a check-in.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Thank you, Lisa. I had a great time.